people in Portland are very Portland, whereas people in the Bay Area, I don't know what you would say. I don't know how you would describe somebody from the Bay Area. There's no set like mold. There's so many different diverse people. I'm not one who dislikes diversity. I'm not like alt-right or anything. But I think that diversity is like spice. You have to like some spice gives people flavor. Some spice gives society a lot more dimension, complexity. I definitely am not one I'm not one to say that, I personally like spice on all my food. I don't know if that's relevant to my discussion, but I personally like to eat spicy food, and I'm not a big fan of bland food. I think that Portland is a lot like, even though Portland food is slightly more bland than Californian food, I do think that Portland handles diversity well, where other places, like in the Bay Area, are kind of overwhelmed by it and don't handle it too particularly well. Portland is a city where there is enough diversity that it makes it the diversity is enjoyable. In the Bay Area, the diversity is too extreme. It's like everybody is not from there, Nobody is from there. 1 person out of 20 is going to be from the Bay Area, and then the other 19 are going to be all from other countries, and they're all going to be like, and then you get you might get diversity you might get diversity to some degree, or in the sense that there's going to be people from other countries, but you're not going to get diversity of like incomes. You're not going to get diversity of, it's going to be extremely wealthy people or extremely poor people. You're not going to get a middle class. The Bay Area is not a place to have a middle class existence. It's a place to be wealthy. I do think that this San Francisco is a city for the rich. It is not a city for, and it's also not a city that's liberal. A city that's liberal allows, treats homeless people well. A city that's liberal, San Francisco is known to be a liberal city. Oakland is a liberal city. Oakland is like the most liberal city I've ever seen. But San Francisco is a city that, in many ways, is a kind of a shame. It's kind of a waste. It's definitely, it's a neoliberal dystopia. Is San Francisco? It has people that are, it basically instead of tax cuts for the rich, San Francisco does immigration that's its tax cuts for the rich. And I think that it's a shame that people, on one hand, I think it's really awesome that there is legitimate multiculturalism in San Francisco. People are from, and it's not just like a black guy from Texas versus like a white guy from Colorado. That's not real multiculturalism. Real multiculturalism is like a guy from France and then a lady from Korea, or a guy from Nigeria and a girl from England. That's real multiculturalism. That's like different languages, different value systems. Like the guy from a guy from Texas is not going to value things so differently. They're still Americans at the end of the day. Americans are still going to have similar value systems, even if they're different ethnic groups. But that being said, they're going to have different. Yes, in America we do like to exaggerate our differences. Oh my gosh, there's so much diversity. But at the end of the day, we're all just people that all grew up in America. We don't have different languages. We don't have. Yes, there are some Americans that speak different languages, but in general, we're not so different. Whereas the Bay Area has like people that are so different, I would say. And of course, the Bay Area is America. But I would say that the average Americans have much more in common than the average, like, people who are not American in the Bay Area. But that being said, I do find myself more comfortable around both work wise as well as just generally around people from Portland. People from Portland are from the U.S. But they're just from other states. They're from like Colorado or Ohio or California, and they're not necessarily from like totally different cultures. And I think that makes it a lot easier to befriend them. Like I had a lot of difficulty in the Bay Area making friends. I was there for almost 6 months. I didn't make any friends. And at first I thought it was maybe my fault. Maybe I'm just not social enough. Maybe I'm just not a cool enough person. But eventually I realized that it wasn't necessarily my fault. It was because people just had different cultures, and people just didn't want to cross those cultural lines. I think that Portland, on the other hand, people have a lot more similar of a culture, even though Portlanders like to pretend that they're diverse. They're like, oh my gosh, we're so diverse. But they're really not. And I think that creates... Portland has a lot of the opposite of what it says it has. It kind of is funny in that way. It kind of glorifies what it doesn't have. And then it says... It exaggerates that it has it, it's probably a defense mechanism because it doesn't because it's polite. It's taboo to say, oh, well, we're not diverse, so that's we're not diverse, so we don't have to be. It's kind of taboo to say, like I would say Portland is very it has a lot of things that it will exaggerate that it has. Like people from Portland will say they're diverse. Like, oh man, we're diverse. We have people we have like feminists and yeah. But at the end of the day, Portland is like 75% white, like 80% white. So yeah, Portland is not that diverse. But Portland is also, but yeah. People will exaggerate and say that it is diverse because they want to. And now my World of Warcraft has crashed. Okay, there we go. And I am also crashing in my mind. Beep, beep. But anyway, people from Portland will say that they are one way and they're not because it's taboo to say anything else. Like people in Portland will talk about. They'll talk about like how they like. People in Portland will say that they like spicy food, even though they don't, because if they like spicy food, then the food would be a lot more similar to California. People in Portland will say that they like hip hop, but they don't like hip hop. If they were honest with you, they would say, "I don't like hip hop. I'm white. I'm white and I don't like hip hop." But they're dishonest, and they'll exaggerate what they don't have and what they really don't want to have more of out of politeness. But because they don't have these things, it makes the place a lot easier to navigate. It makes it a lot easier to like one thing that Portland does is they put a lot of emphasis on their public transport. And one reason that Portlanders have such good public transport is because there's a lot more social cohesion in majority white cities. And that social cohesion allows people to be more socially trusting, and that social trust allows people to be more inclined to take public transport. Whereas if they weren't as socially trusting, if there wasn't as much cohesion, then the public transport wouldn't be as commonly used, because people would think there would be homeless crazy people like in San Francisco, and they would just Uber everywhere like they do in San Francisco. But anyway, I think that Portland is a good place. As I was saying earlier, Portland is a very good place for people of color, even though there aren't a lot of people of color there. And the reason is because there aren't a lot of people of color there. If you were to look at people of color just objectively, whatever ethnic group you are, whether you're Latino or Asian or black or whatever, you're most likely going to be killed by a member of your same ethnic group. So already you're better off being away from your same ethnic group. Your chances of being murdered already go down substantially. Like, let's say you're an African American. If you're an African American, I think it's like an 85% chance that you will be murdered by another African American, whereas the likelihood that you'll be killed by somebody white, even a police officer, is substantially less than by another African American. So already you're safer around majority white people. So you're already safer in Portland as a person of color. You're objectively safer because people of color are not your enemies. They're not the ones that are white people are not your enemies when it comes to murder. You will statistically be more likely to be murdered by your same ethnic group, but that's totally contrary to what we talk about in the media. The media will glorify, oh, this unarmed black man was shot by a police officer, but they don't talk about the black guy that was shot by another black guy, because that happens. It's common. It's commonplace. It's something that happens all the time. And this is something that a lot of right wingers and a lot of like alt-right people, they say this. They're like, what about black on black crime? And I'm not alt-right. I'm just kind of like a realist. Like, we need to talk about, the black community needs to talk about like what it of the real, what's really happening. Is it true that white people will probably shoot? Is it true that police officers have a problem with like racism? That's probably true. But is that the biggest issue? I don't necessarily know. I'm not necessarily sure that that's the biggest issue. What about the crime rate within themselves? Like, that's the bigger issue. What about the but of course that's harder to tackle. There's no answer to that. There's no easy answer to that. How do you deal with internalized crime? But anyway, you're already safer as a person of color around in Portland, because there aren't going to be people that murder you. The people that murder you are already statistically not there, because it's mainly white. So you're better off there. And then number two, people are also much more open-minded. So it's like, when it comes to even though there aren't people of color there in Portland, the white people that you do deal with are going to be almost as welcoming as your same ethnic group. Like, it's like my 2-3 weeks of Portland have been substantially better off. I've been more welcome here in Portland than I have in a lot of my time in California, even though you would think in California, because there are a lot of my same ethnic group, just because there are a lot more ethnic people in California, you would think I would have an easier time making friends, but it was the exact opposite. You're better off as a person of color, especially as a male, to be away from your same ethnic group. You're better off, especially if you're like from a. But anyway, maybe that sounds kind of like self-loathing, and that's maybe to some degree. Maybe I recognize that, growing up in the United States as a person of color, it's not something that you're totally removed from. You're going to be. It's going to have some effects on you, definitely. But that being said, I think that being a with that being said, Portland is a great place for people of color, because people are open-minded, so it's easier to make friends, like way easier to make friends in Portland. Even though everybody's white, it's way easier to make friends as a person of color, because I think in places that are majority non-white, people value whiteness a lot more. People in Portland do not value being white as much as they do in like California, because California does not have a lot of white people, whereas places in Portland